Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of What's on Your Turntable. My name is Steve, and sitting right next to me to my right is my good friend and partner in crime, many crimes actually, Scott Tipping. And tonight we are going to talk a lot of music. We're going to play a lot of music. And originally tonight we were going to do a Kinks versus the Who thing, but Scott and I got together earlier in the week and talked about this, and tell them what you said, Scott.
Well, for those who know Kiss the Sky, Mike Messerschmidt retired last year, and for 20-some-odd years, those guys argued about the Kinks versus the Who, Steve being a Kinks fan and Mike a Who fan. So he proposed this, and I really thought that he was just going to take out his angst at Mike and the Who against me, and I didn't think it was fair. And so I wanted a clean slate and something different. And so we talked about this, which you're going to get underway.
Yeah, what we talked about doing was something regarding cover songs. And we thought it might be fun to play maybe snippets of some of the original, but play some really cool cover songs that we really like. Yeah. So we're going to kick this off with a tune that was made famous by Eric Clapton in Cream, but the original is pretty compelling, goes back to the 1930s, and was done by a person by the name of Robert Johnson. So let me get to the turntable and kick this off with the Robert Johnson version. We'll play a little bit of it, and then we'll jump into the Cream version of it, okay? So you might ask, why are we kicking this off with the Robert Johnson tune? Well, the blues, I get asked this all the time when people come into the store. They ask me what my favorite genre is, and this is it. Hands down, it's the blues. It didn't start out that way. As a kid, I was really into rock and roll, but later on, as I got older and started listening to people like Led Zeppelin and Cream, and that turned, and 10 years after that, turned me on to the blues. So we're going to put on the Cream version of this song, and please note the difference.
Yeah. I'd just like to say, as you're changing records here, that Robert Johnson, I mean, there's multiple sets that you can get of the Robert Johnson files or tracks that he recorded. I can't remember, 20-some-odd singles he recorded, but the reality is most of them have been covered, and most rock and roll is essentially blues, and a lot of it is based off the work of Robert Johnson. I mean, a lot. Cool. And I'd also like to say that when I started to play guitar, my dad gave me this version of Crossroads and said, if you want to play lead guitar, start here. Curious, Steve, if this is an original from your youth, or
yeah, this record is actually physically what is that, 1968, so 52 years old, is that right?
I don't do math, but it sounds right to me.
I'm supposed to do math, but I'm under pressure here, being on the What's on Your Turntable program. Anyway, yeah, this is the sleeve, the original sleeve that the record came in, and my sister Janet wrote her name all over the sleeve, and
Collector's item.
and I wrote something about Director of Admissions and Records, University of Illinois, Urbana, Illinois. So I guess it had something to do with going to school. And then a telephone number, 332-4029, the WCFL broadcast booth.
This to me is my favorite period of Eric Clapton. I feel like Jack Bruce and Ginger spurred an energy and an intensity that we don't see later. No offense to big fans or Eric Clapton, he's done a lot of music, but there you go.
I agree. Totally agree. I think he had a little bit of a resurgence when he released the album From the Cradle.
Okay.
I went to 4 of his shows on that tour,
All right.
and he was really, really good on that tour.
I saw one of those shows and I really liked it, but I want to just throw in devil's advocate here because I was in college when that record From the Cradle came out, and I had it on CD and I loved it, and I haven't listened to it in years because I was in a club and the harp player, I think you know who he is, Dan Bellini, from Howard and the White Boys, lots of other bands. I was bragging about how great it was, and he looked at me and he said, "Doesn't Eric play all the solos note for note from the original recordings?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, man, if I want to hear Otis Rush, I'm putting on Otis Rush." And I kind of, I withered a little bit, you know, but it was a return to form as far as him going back to the music that inspired him, and certainly the live show. There was just a lot of great playing.
I agree. Yeah, folks, if you have questions of Scott or I regarding anything pertaining to music, shoot us a little Facebook message or email or whatever, and we'll try to address that for you. All right, Scott, you're on.
Well, I'm going to change the pace, and I'm going to go with a later David Bowie record here. And, you know, when David was in the 70s in his Ziggy character, he did a record called Pin-Ups that was all 60s covers and stuff that turned him on, and it received mixed reviews, and it's pretty cool, but not as cool as some of his other stuff. But he was never scared to put on a cover here or there. And the last track on this side, which I think is just kind of a unique thing to hear, David Bowie, later day David Bowie, like 2003 David Bowie, is covering Neil Young's I've Been Waiting for You from his first album. Yeah, close enough. I guess the thing about it, to me, that was interesting. Well, there's a lot interesting about it to me, but sometimes we don't think about the depths of what people listen to, and the idea of David Bowie being a really devout Neil Young fan escaped me, admittedly, but he was quite a fan, and I really dig this cover of this.
What year did this come out?
2003.
2003.
And this is Neil's first solo record, so that's arguably 67, 68 as well, I think. I think one of the things to me about later day Bowie is that he released a lot of quality records that up until his last two, The Next Day and Black Star, kind of went unnoticed. You know, he had been established for quite a while. He had kind of become the person that, oh yeah, he released another good record. You know, I think there comes a point with an artist that is consistent and consistently writing good stuff where it's almost hard to make a splash again, you know.
Wow. Yeah, I have to admit, I've never heard this.
Yeah, it's really cool. The whole
Yeah,
album
it's
is
awesome.
amazing, yeah. It's nice to hear him in this context. And going back to blues, actually, I've never heard any of it, but I'm curious to hear it, is that Bowie, there's a famous picture of him sitting in with Buddy Guy at Legends. And, you know, again, it escapes me as to what that would have been or... Cool. Oh, I see where we're going. Nice. I'm getting informed that if nobody asks a question in the next 3 minutes, they're going to set fire to this monitor, which is going to be pretty neat. All right, what do you got?
I think I'm going to do a series of a couple songs that are going to hopefully lead you into something that we did. And a lot of the stuff that I ended up picking out when I was going through records and getting prepared for our show was, oddly enough, from the same basic era. And this is 10 years after Alvin Lee on guitar, doing a song that was originally recorded here in Aurora, Illinois back in 1937, May of 1937, recorded by Sonny Boy Williamson. Right over there, and I'm pointing towards the Leland Hotel, the top of the Leland Hotel, there was a place called the Sky Club. And it was basically a dinner club that for about 20 months was turned into, during the day, was turned into a recording studio. And a lot of great songs were recorded there, and this was one of them, the original version by Sonny Boy Williamson, number uno.
Yeah. Well, first I want to say, just is that I did, you know, Steve and I talked about the cover thing, and I did the polar opposite of this because I knew Steve would have a lot of blues and stuff, and that's a lot of my collection. I went out of my way to not have a lot of that in my arsenal, so it's sort of like, you know, showing up in the wrong dress at a dinner party. But I'm fine with that. But yeah, this song, as well as we were talking earlier about Robert Johnson, the stuff recorded at the Leland, I mean, there's so many singles that have been covered and helped create what we know as rock and roll, for sure. You know, a lot of it, to me, seemed like there seems to be this weird parallel with the British youth coming out of World War II and their connection with the energy of blues music.
So I'm going to put on another track real quick, and you know, oddly enough, I didn't have the original real close at hand and readily available. So this is another version that was recorded right around the same time as the 10 years after version was recorded. So give me a quick second, and I'm going to put this on.
For anyone paying attention, I just would like to note that one of the first arguments my parents ever got into was when I was born. My dad was insisting on naming me Alvin Lee Tipping, and my mom wouldn't have it. That's legit. He wanted me to be named after the guitarist and singer of 10 Years After, but I wasn't.
So before the show, Scott and I were talking a little bit, getting ready for the show, and he was telling me a Johnny Winter story. And I was fortunate enough to have seen Johnny a couple times, and on this particular tour was the first time I saw him. It was 1969, the Kinetic Playground here in Chicago, and he was opening for the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, of all people. So, and the band that opened for Johnny was a band called The Flock. But anyway, it was this particular tour, and maybe I'll tell you what, let's throw out a little thing to get somebody to respond here and ask a question or answer a question. If you can tell us who the second guitar player on this particular cut is and how he became famous, you come in to Kiss the Sky and we'll give you a big discount.
That's my dad. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Called you Alvin.
Yeah. It's stuck.
Jim Ferranti says, good job. Yeah, it's Rick Derringer. And Jim, Rick Derringer, what band was he in prior to hooking up with Johnny and then later Edgar?
That's for an even bigger discount.
A big discount.
I haven't listened to this record in years.
Jim, where are you?
They sound really good together. That was a good pairing. So I told earlier this story about getting to hang out with Johnny Winter, which I shan't tell now, but Rick was there.
All right, the McCoys.
Fronted by Mike and Vicky.
Of Hang On Sloopy fame. So now imagine Sonny Boy Williamson's version from 1937.
Right. It's pretty beautiful to think, and I guess that's one of the things about covers in particular. I don't believe Tommy was playing bass at this point. Somebody just asked if Tommy Shannon was playing bass. He can check. I think at this point Johnny had parted ways with Tommy Shannon. But Tommy Shannon from Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble was Johnny Winter's first bass player, with Uncle John Turner playing drums. They played Woodstock together.
Randy Joe Hobbs.
Yeah. But that's a really cool question.
$1969.
Cool. All right. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, we're doing... You can put on whatever you want to from there. So, I guess we're doing this Leland thing, so we're gonna, you know, there's a lot that happened here. There's a lot that happened here in Aurora to get the Leland known. And if you look inside this record, Steve Warrenfeltz made sure to have this little shout out to Mike McDonough, Kevin Rogers, and Scott Christoffel, who were some people early on that brought the blues to Aurora, or at least acknowledged the blues in Aurora and made it known where that stuff was coming from. Years later, Steve and I did this tribute record, which was sort of a recreation of a lot of Leland stuff. And I don't know what he's going to play. It was a really fun project. We kind of reimagined a lot of it, and some of it we kind of did verbatim. Hey, man, don't touch my records. No, I'm just kidding. It is one of the coolest projects I've ever been a part of. Oh, yeah. This is Robbie Folks. So Robbie Folks, Grammy-nominated Bloodshot artist, came in and did some tracks with us for this, and this is one of them. And he really heard this song, Texas Tommy, in a different light. And a lot of the old blues people, this is gonna sound silly probably, but a lot of the old blues people, they didn't have form like we know it now. When we started to listen to old blues, a lot of old blues didn't have specific forms. We now, like, people will say a 12-bar blues, 8-bar blues, 16-bar, whatever. But at the time, a lot of people just played what they felt. And as a result, a lot of really early recordings didn't have a proper form. And if you listen to this does not have a proper form. There's a lot of cut bars and a lot of weird things. He had Gary Shepard's playing tuba on this, and Alex Hall playing drums. And I'd like to say for the record, and I think Robbie would agree with me if he was watching, but I know he's not, is that when this started out, it was not happening. The first few takes were pretty dreadful, but it got real cool real fast.
You want to talk a little bit about how you came about deciding what this record was going to sound like and what your thoughts were?
Sure. I'd also like to point out that if you listen there, on the album, everything's pretty much live, even mixing. We tried to do it as old school as possible. Basically, when Steve and I met, we had this idea that we were going to upgrade the music from the late 30s to the 50s. we didn't want to modernize it too much, but we had a couple sneaky overdubs, and one of them here is John Abbey is also playing bass. He put on bass afterwards because the tuba just wasn't cutting it, or it was cutting it, but we just wanted a little more. The sound and the project just kind of carved itself out. It was weird. When you make an album, you sometimes have a vision for what it is, and then as it starts to reveal itself, you realize it might be something completely different. And hopefully, I felt like my job as producer was to follow where it was going versus dictate what I thought it should be. So a lot of this stuff just kind of was happenstance. It was a cross collaboration type of thing. It's a cool track. Oh yeah. We can let this. Yeah. This is Nora O'Connor, Don Sternberg, Gerald Dowd, John Abbey, Scott Stevenson, and Dave Nelson. You did. And this was another really fruitful session. There was there's something about making a record where there's just little bits of magic that can only be in that moment in time. And the Nora sessions, all the sessions were that way, but the Nora session was a really special one.
How long did it take you to make this record, Scott?
Well, I had been touring a lot at the time, so I think it took us a couple years where we would just find times with musicians and availability with them, availability with me. You were at a bunch of the sessions, but there were times you couldn't go to them. We worked at John Abbey's studio, King Size Sound Labs, and it just became a comfortable home. And one of the things that was interesting to me was it felt like, you know, as he was saying, the original stuff was recorded in the Sky Club, which was a nightclub by night recording studio during the day. And there was something about King Size that felt like you were walking into a party from the night before. It was a funky little place that, you know, the band who had been before you didn't get rid of their beer cans and stuff like that. And so, to my mind anyway, it felt like we're doing, you know.
Well, it's interesting to note that the original sessions took place over a period of about 20 months, and I think that album there took about 20 months to make.
Sure. I think the only difference is we're about 16 songs and they were at like 200 and some sides, right?
232 or something, yeah.
I'd like to show. Not that we're going to play this, but I did bring this. Like, if you are interested in Stuff Leland, I mean, first, of course, I'd encourage you to see the work that we did or hear the work we did, but which is not available digitally. But there's a lot of really cool compilations that a lot of us have scarfed up through the years where, you know, this is a French mono copy of this old Sonny Boy Williamson record, or sides, and, you know, it's kind of happening to see Aurora, Illinois on the back. I don't know if you can zoom in there now or whatever, but it's there. Thank you, Kevin.
Kevin, I'm just an accountant.
Nora O'Connor, the day that she came in, I had met her before. I'd never worked with her before, and we hadn't really thought about what we were doing or how we were doing it. And she asked if there was anything to drink in the place, and I said, there is water, coffee, PBR, and whiskey. And she said, those are the only things I drink. That's a fun listen. Okay, do whatever you want. Thank you, good sir.
So about a week ago or thereabouts, the lead guitar player, the guitar player for the original Kingsmen, passed away. And when we were talking about doing this show and doing cover songs, I had mentioned to Scott that I think we ought to do a little bit of a tribute to Mike Mitchell, the guitar player for the Kingsmen, and play the Kinks version of Louie Louie. And for those of you that are younger than I and play guitar, Louie Louie was the track that all of us back in the early to mid 60s learned. It was the first song that we learned how to play on the guitar. 3 chords basically, bar chords. And go ahead.
No, I just want to point out that, I mean, total respect to Mike Mitchell's passing, and I think it's cool we're playing this. But people, I want you to know that he proposed a Kinks versus Who show, and he found a way to get the Kinks on. And I don't know if it's so, because why are we not listening to Mike Mitchell right now? Why are we listening to Ray and Dave?
Because I couldn't find the 45. It's buried somewhere in my house. But you're right.
No, it's great.
You're right, yeah. So when you were a kid and you were first learning how to play guitar, was there a song that everybody was learning how to play? And
No, I don't think so, because actually it was weird when I was growing up. There was a lot of, there was a lot of really technical guitar players. There were, that was the days of Eddie Van Halen and stuff like that. So people were that was when guitar magazines were popular. So a lot of it was just learning. It didn't affect me, but that's what a lot of people were learning. For me, what was different was that my dad was a guitar player. So we learned old rock and roll tunes so I could go play with him or sit in with his band. Like his band, at that time his band wasn't playing much, but they would have backyard parties and I'd be able to learn a tune to play with, Actually, a great lesson. This is totally sidetracked, but one of the things I read in a guitar magazine that changed my life was that Tom Petty and Mike Campbell were talking about how all these kids in guitar magazines could learn like Eddie Van Halen solos note for note, but they couldn't go jam with a band. And that's when some of the stuff that my dad was teaching me made a lot of sense. It was cool to know tunes that you could go sit in with people with versus I know this snippet of a solo or something like that.
So Smoke on the Water wasn't a song.
Oh, that was, we still had stuff like, he just said Smoke on the Water. That stuff like that was popular, but it wasn't like, everybody plays Louie Louie.
So since you bring them up.
Okay. It's going back to the Kinks, folks. Nice drop. I'd like to say for the record, too, Eddie Van Halen could sit in with anybody and play anything. So Tom and Mike's comments were not directed at him, but more the thought of just learning a segment of him. Yeah. Sure. My Aunt Janet and Uncle Bill loaned me this record when I was in kindergarten, and it kind of scared me. You know, it's interesting because there's a pop sensibility to Van Halen, even their darkest stuff, but there's something about this that was pretty heavy and pretty dark and creepy for a little kid.
So when I saw the Kinks in 1979, it was either 79 or 81, I can't remember. They were touring on Low Budget, and for the encore, they did a 3-song encore, and the last song, Ray introduced to the audience as, in a very strong British accent, Ray goes, "And now for our final number, we'd like to do a Van Halen song for you all." And they whipped into this song.
Yeah. I would like to say that my friend that I work with, Peter Himmelman, he played in a band in Minneapolis called Sussman Lawrence, and they opened for the Kinks maybe a couple times, and around the Low Budget era. And they tell a story of going about 5 to 10 seconds over and having the Kinks roadies literally throwing their drummer off of his drum throne because they had gone over. Kindergarten, indeed, Mary Lou.
Yeah, right.
Stunted growth for me, too. That was where my education came and went.
You know, I have to admit that they reinvented this song and they sort of made it their own.
Oh, yeah. You know, after his passing, it was interesting to go back to those early records because for me with Van Halen, when I was a little kid up and through about high school, a lot of that stuff meant a lot to me, and then other music came forward, and it's not that I disowned it, I just didn't listen to it anymore. And after Eddie passed, I went back to a lot of those really early records. That to me was kind of the thing, the Roth era, and it was so much fun to go back and revisit. There's just a lot of beautiful music there. As I said, Steve and I didn't really talk about what uniform to wear, so a lot of the records I brought are not related to... it would be the second track. There's like a little thing we can kind of chat over if you'd like, because where it starts is nothing. So I brought... I think it's earlier than that. See that first track is just like a tiny lip. See that? So I brought this is a popular cover, and this was go back just a little earlier. This was kind of a funky cover to me as far as what possibilities were. These people took Zeppelin out early on. Yeah, cool. And my dad had a CD that was like some 60s thing where I first heard this, and I remember thinking like, what the hell version is this?
I saw them do this song on TV.
Yeah.
It was weird. It was not a typical show, too. I can't remember. It wasn't like the Ed Sullivan Show or anything like that. It was... I can't really remember, but not a show that you would expect.
Sure.
Psychedelic version of a Motown song, right?
Yeah. That, to me, what I like about it is the fact that they really weren't trying to go Motown with this tune. You know, this is not a recreation, you know, and they have a really, it's a good groove. Yeah. It's funky in its own way.
Do you know if Diana Ross ever commented on?
I do not.
Be interesting to know.
Yeah. I really liked, too, because, like, with the Supremes, they had just such beautiful, pretty, ornate backing vocals, and hearing this kind of loose, hippie male vocal taking the place of it was interesting to me.
The band was relatively short-lived, no?
Yeah, I think there are incarnations that stuck around, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Beck, Bogart and the Peace, and Cactus.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's like, you know, so-and-so presents the Vanilla Fudge or something over the last, where they're bringing back the music and stuff, but it's not. This should also say to record nerds, the power of cleaning. When I got my copy of this, it was pretty trashed, but it cleaned up really nice.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. How do you clean your records? Do you use wood glue?
No, I'm scared of the wood glue thing.
Yeah, me too.
I use the kit that you have sold when I'm at home. What is that thing called?
Which kit?
Well, I have two. I have the Spin Clean, and then I have that spray thing. That's my favorite home kit.
Hmm.
And as a child, this sounds really stupid, but I never understood why he seemed so exasperated.
Yeah, he almost, it seems like they're crying. They want,
Yeah.
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 Hey, Diane, thank you for watching, or listening. Watching. We have cameras here.
I'd like to say as a side note is that I miss getting to do this with the pandemic and everything. Records to me are a pastime that are lovingly shared. I like to sit around with people and listen to sides of things. I like to have people come over and bring over records. I like to be DJ for an evening, you know, like it's... I remember thinking when everything went digital how nice it would be to have playlists, and that's certainly convenient, but it's not the same.
Yeah, getting together, drinking beers.
Yeah.
Speaking of beers, I hear there's a new beer that's coming out.
Yeah, well, as I sit here with a Budweiser, we should mention that Two Brothers has a new beer out called Amplifier.
Amplifier.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty cool.
Directed at
design.
musicians, no
Yes,
less,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Smart. I
Very
like it.
smart. Yeah.
What
I'll
is it?
drink
Is it a lager or an ale? Do you know?
I believe it's an IPA.
There's
There's a lot of IPA craze these days, you know?
Cool.
Hey, Brownie. Just has a good energy. I think the Vanilla Fudge was also, as a child, when I first heard the word Quaaludes, and I didn't know what it meant. Sorry. It's true, though.
All right.
I do have one slow one I want to play too, but let's go here next. This is the last track on side one. Yeah, and this Fudge record, they covered, I think all the music is covers, and all of them are like 8-minute opuses, you know, like they all have, we're done, no we're not done, we rebuild, you know. It's cool. Yeah. Thank you, good sir. So you were talking earlier about tunes that I learned. One of my first tunes that I ever learned from my dad was Them Changes. And I'm a huge Buddy Miles fan, and Buddy covered a lot of stuff, and I absolutely love his version of this Greg Allman classic, Dreams. I like the different groove to it. I love the horns. I should say, too, that one of the things that's weird, I guess it's different about the digital age versus records, is that I actually keep a log of where all my records have come from. I used to remember them, and oddly, once I put them in the computer, I can't remember them off the top of my head, though I do remember this one. There was this guy by my parents' house in Wheaton that had this little brick and mortar shop that had the best records ever when I was starting college and I had no money. And we all knew he couldn't last forever, so we would go in and try to buy as much as possible because he was just not in the right location for a record store. He was very angry and didn't like people, but he had great material, and this was one of my favorite records I bought from him. Buddy lived in Chicago for many a year and would frequent places like Kingston Mines or Blues on Belmont. I saw him at Blues on Belmont because he had a friend of mine who was a music store owner had rented his horn section, some specific horns for an evening, and he got some free passes that he couldn't use. And he's really one of my favorite singers and one of my favorite drummers. And it's interesting with Buddy to me is he gets a lot of flack because in the Band of Gypsies days, he was replacing Mitch Mitchell, who was a tight kind of jazz drummer. But to me, Buddy just had this heart, you know? He just had this feel, this groove that just exuded over everything.
I think Band of Gypsies as a live album is perhaps Hendrix's finest moment.
Yeah.
Live-wise. Yeah. And a lot of that had to do with what Buddy brought to the table.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, he was a member of the Electric Flag with Mike Bloomfield. I mean,
right.
There's a story, the bass player from the Electric Flag, Harvey Brooks, Buddy Miles was in Wilson Pickett's band, and they wanted to use him for the Electric Flag. And Mike Bloomfield went up to Buddy's hotel, where Buddy was staying and Wilson Pickett was staying, to tell Wilson, we're taking Buddy Miles. And according to Harvey Brooks, he was sitting in the lobby, and Mike Bloomfield came running through the lobby yelling, "Pickett's got a gun. He doesn't want us to take money." And just they all got out of there. That's a question for you, man.
Well, the best way to store your vinyl collection is the question that has been posed. Well, for sure, you want to keep it in a relatively dry situation. Not too dry, of course, but drier than what you might get on a hot, humid summer day. Vertical is really good. You don't want to store them flat. Flat is bad, like this. But you don't want it too tight either. You don't want your records in a situation where you have to cram them in to get them back into the spot. You want them nice and firm. So in a nice shelving unit,
Sure.
yeah. We should show pictures of how we store our stuff.
Sure. Yeah, and I would avoid direct sunlight. My original copy of Buddy Miles, Chapter 7, that my uncle gave me, a friend of mine left on the dash of his Honda Civic, and it didn't come back. All right, what do you got?
Well, this is humble pie.
Cool.
And give you a little backstory on this.
All right.
So this is another live album. It's Humble Pie, rocking the Fillmore. My favorite live record, is that a skip?
Sounded like it. It looks
I
like it
didn't
just
clean-
needs to be cleaned, though. I bet you
Yeah,
it's
I
all
didn't
right.
clean my
Yeah.
records. My favorite live record of all time is the Allman Brothers, Fillmore East. That's my favorite. And Mike and I, the aforementioned Mike, and I have argued all for 20-some, 30-some, how long have we known each other? 50 years. For 50 years we have argued about whether Live at Leeds or the Fillmore Allman Brothers is the best live album. And I always forget about this record, the Humble
yeah.
Pie record.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, people know this, but it should be known that, like, a lot of people are used to the pop of Peter Frampton, and Peter Frampton used to be a bad rockin' dude, you know, like his playing on this shit stuff is unbelievable.
Yeah, and this, I think, is his final tour with Humble
Yes.
Pie. After this, he left and went solo.
Yeah, and around this record, this is nerd, it's all nerd stuff, whatever. He had a guitar that was feeding back a lot of Gibson hollow body, and somebody had for him a 50s 3-pickup Gibson custom Les Paul, which was like his main instrument for a period of time. And then in 1980, they were taking a cargo plane out of the country, and the plane blew up before the band was on it, and people died, and all the gear was destroyed, including his guitar, and it was forgotten about. And I want to say about 30 some odd years later, somebody sent him a random email that said, you know, your guitar exists. And just within the last 5 years, he's been reunited with the guitar from this stuff. And it's beautiful. Like it's weathered a lot from, it's got burn marks all over it. But somebody, when the plane blew up, grabbed the guitar case. Nobody asked, Sills. Just kidding. Yeah.
So for those of you that maybe don't recognize the song, this was originally made famous by Ray Charles.
Yep. It's a great guitar player. Okay. Good one, then. We should do two. Because we're close.
So I saw Humble Pie twice live in my life. And the first time, you're going to love this. They played, when I was down at U of I, they played the Illini Union Room A.
Oh, wow.
And there were maybe 75 people in the audience. And less than a year later, they played a place in Chicago called the Syndrome, which was the Coliseum. It was the Coliseum first, then became the Syndrome. And they played there before 12,000 people. Amazing. Less than a year.
Yeah.
So won't you walk right up and sit right down?
Yeah.
Daddy, let your
It's gorgeous.
mind roll on.
And you're playing this.
Walk right up.
Was it yesterday? Was Marriott's birthday or the anniversary of his passing? This is relevant. I don't know who wrote about Dylan talking about how Watchtower is saying after Jimmy covered it, it belongs to him. But that's a beautiful comment and sentiment, which is true. A lot of writers feel like when a song goes to somebody else, when somebody else covers it and they make it their own, it's now their person.
Absolutely. Sort of like what Ray Davies said about the Van Halen. You really got me.
All comes back to Ray. This is definitely not where we're going to end, and we're going to end soon. But I think it's important to hear this one. I've been listening to. You can just start it right on side B. I've been listening to this record forever. Curtis Live. Curtis Mayfield's one of my favorite musicians, and I just want to say before he starts talking is that context is everything in a cover, and I am not a fan of the Carpenters, nor have I ever been a fan of the Carpenters. Although I realize their talents, and Karen Carpenter was a badass drummer, don't get me wrong, but context. So this is Curtis Mayfield taking a Carpenters song that before I heard this, I viewed as a sappy love song, and making this lyric something much greater than what I would assume they anticipated. Good point, Sills. Check this out.
A lot of folks think this particular lyric is not appropriate for what might be considered underground, but I think underground is whatever your mood or your feelings might be at the time, so long as it's the truth. I think it's very appropriate that we might lend a few words of inspiration about here. We've only just begun.
I mean,
It's awesome.
yeah.
To live. White lace and promises.
I cried my eyes out the first time I heard this.
A kiss for luck, and we're on.
Yeah, you're going to see two grown men cry now.
Yeah.
I think we have less than a minute left to go here, so thank you all for
We'll fly.
joining in and listening, and hopefully you enjoyed this. And
To choose.
you know what, Scott, an hour is just too
We'll
short.
start
Yeah,
out
I know.
walking.
I was pushing for more, but we have this beautiful team of volunteers, and they do enough for us.
And yet it's just begun.
We're grateful for them. But
Thank you all very much for handling the cameras, handling the sound. Larry over there on sound. Charlie in the room there managing the ship. Sarah working the dials, keeping us on time, in tune.
Together, day to day.
square.
It's amazing to me how much a lyric can change depending on whose voice it's coming from. And that to me is something that I was hoping to mention, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to.
We'll find a place where there's room to grow. And yet we've just begun. Sharing horizons that are new to us. Watching the signs along the way. Talking it over, just the two of us. Working together, day to day. Together. Together. And when the evening comes, we'll smile. There's so much of
Well, if we're
life
still rolling and you're still out there, again, we want to say thank you for
we'll find
checking
a
in
place
and listening in. And this is the final show of the season. I don't know exactly what a season is, quite frankly, but we're going to be taking a break, and we might do this again in the fall. We'll see. We'll see where things are at. We have no idea.
But the possibilities are endless.
We've only just begun.
Oh, you're not laughing? Oh.
Oh, you did laugh?
We're also
I-
talking
yeah.
about taking it on the road.
We are talking about taking this on the road. That's right. Yeah. Good night, everybody. Take care. Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.